We're all ready? John, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All righty, it's all up to you.
Okay. How many of you have seen the article in the current issue of the American Woodpecker? About a third? Okay. I have 4 or 5 copies of the article here. You guys want to share them?
Tell them that they got to join the AAW and they would have got it in the magazine.
Or they can look at it on the website. We're here to talk about Cryptex. The Cryptex is, first I heard about it was when Dad Brown did his book, The Da Vinci Code, and thought it was interesting. And then in June of 2007, I saw an article in Scroll Saw magazine, and they had a guy had a Cryptex in there. The problem is that he used a router, a scroll saw, a drill press, and all these crazy things to make round objects. And it seemed like it'd make it a lot easier to use a lathe. So based upon what he had in his design, I modified it, and I made this guy. This is the first one I made, and it's pretty much the way he had it in his magazine, in the magazine article. Kind of complicated, too many parts. It has stuff on the outside. The design of the rings are complex, and all those sort of things. So after I made that for my daughter for her granddaughter for her birthday. Incidentally, when I gave it to her for her birthday, there was a gift certificate inside. If that gives you guys any ideas. Yeah. After I did that one, my grandson had a birthday coming up, and I decided to simplify it, and all this external structure went inside. And a little bit cleaner design, at least I think so. And I've made several of them over the years, and this is one I made that I used in the article. If you look in there, you'll see this one, and there's another one floating around here someplace in the form of a castle. Who's got it?
Right here.
No, that's a rook. Oh, queen. There's one that's got a white wood. Over there someplace. Looks like this. I used that one and this one in the article that we wrote. And this last week, I made this one. I kind of pattern them after chess pieces. That's supposed to be a queen, in case you didn't recognize it. This one is staying with the club. And I think that you guys got some raffles coming up in the future, raffles or auctions. So that's going to be available for that.
Nice, thank you.
Well, my granddaughter had a Cryptex. My grandson had a Cryptex. And my wife thought my daughter ought to have a Cryptex. And I said, well, okay, what shape do I make? She picked out a sphere. So this one, this is what I made for my daughter for her birthday. I'm not going to tell you how to make it. I'm going to leave that as a challenge to you. The internal workings are the same as these others, but just because the internal workings made it the same doesn't mean it's easy to put together. It took me 3 days to figure out how to do this thing. Then my son-in-law had to have a Cryptex. So that's kind of the history there. Incidentally, if anybody can't figure out what the code is for that football living in Denver, I feel sorry for him. Okay? Now, if you look at these, this has got 5 rings going across here that I'll show you how to make them. That has the code that allows you to open it. And this one, it actually have indexes on it so you can tell where to start. That's too easy. So what I did on these others, I've got 6 rings on there. Actually, on this one, it's got 7 because you got 1 on each end. You got 6 rings on here, and one of them doesn't turn. So that is 1 letter of your code word. Then you have to figure out what that starts with and then go across. Unless you put the letters on backwards. So part of these goes left to right, and others go right to left. Well, I don't want to make it easy. So that's where we got there. Now, if you look at this, this is what I call a box tube. That's the box, that's where the treasure goes. The pins go up here. Those are 4-penny finish nails. They're glued in there. Then if you look at this guy, it's got a ring here, then it's got the outer rings. So this thing just actually is 3 concentric cylinders put together. And the inner ring, I call the backbone tube because everything goes off of it, has a slot in it for the pins. And the rings fit together in a fancy way. Okay. Okay, so you've got your box tube here, and you got your pin sticking up. And then you've got this backbone tube that goes down through here. And it goes down here to the end and across. And like so. And then there's the outer rings. They're out here. And we've got those rings in there. Now, in order to make this thing work, we've got to have a way for those rings to turn and lock into the pins. So if you look at the ring itself, it's made like that, and your pin comes up in here. And then there's a notch in this ring, so you line the notch up, and it will work. And we're getting ready to make some rings. I always try to make extra rings. Because, we never make mistakes. But it doesn't hurt to have some extra rings. I'll pass these around and let you guys look at them so you get an idea of what we're making.
Pass around some of the finished ones.
Some of them have notches in it, some of them do not. Of those that are passing around. But let's make some wood dust here.
John?
Yeah.
Somebody suggested you pass around one of the finished ones so they can see it while you're making it.
Sure. I gave Henry a copy, PDF copy of the file, and
Yeah, we'll get it on.
I'll let some intelligent individual open this one. It uses the same code word they used in the Da Vinci Code. Remember what that is?
Apple?
Apple, yeah.
John, can I have a minute?
Sure.
I want to thank you guys. You donated $506 to Pete tonight. We'll get the recliner and we'll give the remainder to Pete.
Good. Thank you.
In case you haven't figured it out, I do encourage questions. There's no way that we're going to finish this thing tonight, but we'll go a long ways and we'll show you the major parts. And I've got some props over here that will show you how to have things go together. Okay, all of the blanks I have on this thing are 2.5 inches square and various lengths. Well, I'm going to start off with, tighten it up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn a tenon on this thing. You guys never have your chisels act up on you, do you? Every time you use it? There we go. And that's a little bit thick, so we turn it down.
What's the reason for the recess in the rings?
The reason in the recess for the rings, that's so that you'll have some place for the pin to go when you rotate the ring. Or if you got that ring up there, you need a place for that pin to reside. Now, if I did it right, I'd made my antenna too small. Grabs it. Okay, what I'm making here is going to be our rings that go on the outside. Start on the outside and work our way in.
John, do you use just one type of wood for the rings?
Well, let's see. I see a light colored wood, I see a dark colored wood.
Thank you. Can you give us free votes for this one?
Say again?
The code?
That belongs to my grandson, and his name is John. Kyle John Timothy Barkey. So that's JKTB, and he was born in January 1970. No. 1990. 1990. I don't know about you guys, but when I design something, I like to make it easy on myself. So I design it around the tools that I've got. And right now I'm using a 1.5 inch diameter Forstner bit. I'm going to drill a hole down through the middle. It helps if I got it seated on it. And as you guys know, you don't want it going too fast or you burn the bit. How many of you have ever been using a Forstner bit like this and did not clean out the shavings and you got your bit stuck? I see a lot of heads rocking up and down. And we want to make at least 6 rings, and that's going to be 1/2 inch a piece, so that'd be 3 inches. And we want a little bit of an extra, so we go a little bit past 3 inches. Now, the problem is that I don't have a 3-inch long bit. I'm not going to let that bother me. I don't let it bother me because we're going to cut these rings off, and that makes the hole shorter so we can reach the bottom. Okay. I know my next hole is going to be 1 3/4. I'm going to go ahead and change the bit now while the chuck is being held in place. Let's just get ready for the next step. What we'll do is we'll cut these rings off, and the hole isn't going to be deep enough get all the rings, but once we shorten it, we can go ahead and drill the rest of the rings. I don't like to use an extension bit if I don't have to. Anybody got any idea why? It wobbles, yeah. So I always start off, even on the deep holes, start off with the Forstner bit or any other bit without the extension, and then come back. I also like to support stuff. So now I've got it supported. Now if I didn't have this piece of plexiglass up here, I'd say this so I didn't hit the guys in the front row. Okay, we want to turn this down to 2 inches in diameter. Nobody's ever seen roughed out before, right? Okay. I've got my caliper set at 2 inches. You always want to measure so you don't go too far. Put that in my tools, I'll take it home with me. Now, I like to take a pencil and mark the bottoms of those holes. And when I'm trimming it down, if those lines disappear, I'm in trouble. You've all used the skew to make cleaning cuts before, haven't you? Peeling cuts?
Sorry.
Now here's where I get making a big catches. Now this being on the outside is not quite as critical as later when we're doing the box tube and the backbone tube, because those we want to be fairly accurate. Okay, that's close enough. And at this point, you would want to sand it. Sand it and actually do finish sanding. You want to go all the way down to your finest grit. I usually go down to about 320. Let's further the sand up a little bit. Okay. Now there's our outside ring. We've got a hole through the middle, 1.5 inches in diameter. We've got our outside roughly 2 inches. And now we want to convert this into rings. Well, before we convert it into rings, we need to know where we're going to mark it, a few things like that. So, I bring my tool rest over here, hopefully. Something tells me this lathe, does it have an index on it?
Yeah, but it's not the easiest to use.
What's that?
Even gotta have the screw, and it screws into the,
Well, the one we've got's got an index pin right here, and I don't see an index pin on this one. Okay,
John, do you need the shorter tool rest?
what's that?
Do you want the shorter tool rest?
That's all right. Okay, there's several ways of doing this. The way that I would normally do it at home is that I would lock my spindle, and I'd draw a line across here in the lock position. And then I would rotate it to the next point, draw another line, rotate to the next point, draw another line. Now, if you don't have an index pin, like this one doesn't, then another way of doing it is you draw your line across there, and that's gonna be your index. That's gonna be the starting point. Yeah, hand me a piece of paper. Somebody's a mind reader over there. So take a piece of paper and wrap around there until it meets and mark it. Okay, and I carefully folded it at that point. How many of you have been camping? When you went camping, did you ever forget and leave something at home? Never? Okay. Well, that's one of the things that makes camping interesting, because you have to improvise. Okay, now I got a piece of paper that goes all the way around and just meets. See that? Okay, so it just meets.
Wrong button.
you're up.
Okay. Now, I could take this and I could fold it in half. I'm gonna mark it right there. Okay, now I'm gonna take this and fold it in half. I'm gonna mark it. And same thing over here. Okay. Now what I can do is I'm gonna start at that point right there and line that up. And hold it in place. And if I'm doing this right, I can go around here and there's 90 degrees. There's 180. And there's 270. So I can bring my tool rest back over here using the straight edge. This is like mine at home, needs a little bit of wax. Okay, line that up. Now, I've got 4 equal marks around there. Okay. Take this quarter point right here. Now, that's 1/4 of the way around, right? I take this and I divide it in half, fold it in half. And I fold that in half. That gives me 4 divisions within each of the 4 quadrants. And you can divide the thing up that way. Everybody get the idea? And just keep doing that until you get it as fine as you want. Thanks for the paper. Okay, so now we got this thing marked. I got it cut down to the size. Got the center part in there. We've now marked it with either the paper or with an index pen. Now down at Colorado Springs, they had one of these. They only had a B version. They had the index pen over here, but no pen to put in it. You guys even took the index pen away.
That's an A.
That's an A version.
Okay, I'll forgive you. Okay, we've got it marked. Got it marked horizontally.
How small do you go down in your markings?
At home, most of the lathes I've worked with have 15 degrees, so it'd be 24 and then 24 around. Let's see, if you're using that method, you're going to have 4, and 4 times 4 is 16, and you keep going down. You can go down as far as you want to. If you look at this first Cryptex over here, I think I have a complete alphabet on there, plus 9 or 10 numbers. That's ridiculous. It starts getting too small. What I do is I stop at 24, and I typically use first 24 letters of the alphabet. And I also figure out what my code word is going to be. Because I want to make damn sure that all my code word letters are in that alphabet, in that letter that I use. You don't even have to use letters. Who was it that had the magazine in Wood Turner magazine here earlier? One of the guys was showing me an article that he had Wood Turner magazine, and he used jewels around the ring. You can use symbols, you can use jewels, you can use colors. Especially if you're making this for a young child, you may want to use fewer letters. You may want to have their name plus 1 or 2 others, but depends upon who you're doing it for, and how devious you want to be. Okay, I've got this set for a 1/2 inch. Typically what I do is I have an 1/8 inch parting tool, which I left at home, so I'm improvising. I'm still going to mark it into 1/2 inch lengths, and that'll be the width of my rings, and we'll cut them off a little bit later. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm making 7 because I got a dip right in here. I throw that away. Okay, now we've got our rings laid out there. We've got the horizontal marks on them. And now we want to convert this over into the rings themselves, okay?
Did you allow for the width of your parting tool?
Yes. If I'm making a 1/2 inch wide, you have an 1/8 inch parting tool, it gives you 3/8 of an inch for the actual ring. Now I've got backup parting tool, it's a little bit thinner. My parting tool I use at home is about 1/16 of an inch, not an 1/8. If I was going to use an 1/8, I could use this guy. Okay. So that's built into it. Okay, now we want to build or cut the recess that the pins are going to rotate in. Now, this is an 1.5 inch hole, 2 inch diameter, 3/4. So if everything works out right, everything has a minimum thickness of 1/8 of an inch, any of the cylinders. Now, depending upon what you're doing, you don't have to use my dimensions, but that gives you an idea where we're at. Okay. Now I'm going to make a precision drilled hole in there. There's my precision hole. That's accurately measured to 1/1000th of an inch, right? Okay.
It's just how many varies, right?
Yeah, plus or minus. I have an engineering background, and one of the common jokes the engineers have is you measure the micrometer, You mark it with chalk, you cut it with an axe. Now, yeah, I know about how far to go in. I go in about 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't really make that much difference as long as you got enough room for your nail, for your pin. I think Pete told me how to make these. Old hacksaw blade, sawzall blade, turn it down. It's been a while since I've used this. Let's see if it still works. Okay, there's our first ring.
What's a sawzall?
Say again?
Reciprocating saw?
Yeah, it's a humongous big jigsaw. It's about that long.
Sideways.
What's that?
Instead of jigsaw
Yeah.
goes this way.
Yeah, goes lengthwise with the thing.
Reciprocating saw.
Used a lot in construction business. Okay, there's our first ring. And as I pull these things, this thing makes a better cut than what I've been using. Okay, this is our first ring. I'm going to mark it with a 1. Now, you don't have to mark them if you don't want to, but I like to keep them in order because if somebody's trying to crack the code and they line up the grain, it makes it wrong. But if I have them in the right order, then any imperfections that I make in the cutting the plane across here, it evens it out. Okay, there's ring 1.
Do you have your drill bit marked for the depth?
No,
Yes, you go. 7,000
I use that calibrated eyeball.
Going back to because the inside of the
I cut them about 1/8 of an inch deep. It's not real critical. Now just remember, if you go too deep, then when you cut it off, you don't have any rabbit left.
That 4-star bit you're using right now is 1 3/4 inch, correct?
Correct. Where did I lay down my parting tool?
Top of the line.
Oh, okay.
Right where it should
As
be.
you get older,
Rich-
that's gonna
Richard?
get worse.
Yeah.
Rich, are you recording?
Spoke for my glasses for 10 minutes the other day and they were on my face.
Okay. Put it over here this time. Okay, now this is ring 2. And we mark it. Now you notice I'm marking these on the inside. I mark them on the inside. They're less likely to be sanded off or otherwise destroyed. Okay? Now, you want me to make all the rest of those, you want to go on? Okay, I thought you would want that. Okay. Now, we've got all these lines across here, dividing it up into the sections. See those lines?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at this point, I take a sharp knife and I go around, I deburr it, clean it up. And typically at this point, I'll take a wood burner and I'll put the letters in. You can put the letters in or whatever other symbol you want. Okay? Take this off for a minute. Now, you have all 6 of your letters there. Let me grab some props. I don't need them yet. Okay, got all 6 of your rings there. You've got them numbered so you know what order they are. Line them up. And in the final product, well, they're out circulating. This rabbet or recess faces away from the bottom. It faces away from the bottom. Now, you can you have a choice. You can either cut the notch next, or you can letter them first. Doesn't make any difference. Let's say that we do the lettering first. And I just start at some random point and put down the number of letters I've got. I think it's A through X on those over there. Then I line them up and I say, okay, my code word is, and I figure out what letter is going to be assigned to each ring. That's another reason for numbering these things, so you know where they're at. Okay, then if I'm going to do letter A on this particular ring, I take a mark down here, turn it over, and take my favorite tool and make a notch. Now, that is the notch that the pin is going to go out through when you are opening up the ring later on. Now, the width of that notch is important. Now, some of you have been playing around with these other Cryptex over here. Some of them are easier than others. The ones that are more difficult have the narrow notch. The ones that are easier have a wider notch. They're also easier if the notch is lined up accurately underneath the letter. If you're slightly off one side or the other, that confuses people because they have to misalign the code word in order to get it out. Okay, so we've got them marked, we've got them numbered, and we've got the notch in. Everybody with me so far? Okay, now let's make the next part.
What's your favorite tool to make
What's
the
your
notch?
favorite, yeah, how do you make the notch? What tool?
What's your favorite tool?
Dremel.
Okay, use a Dremel.
Why does the pen go underneath, why doesn't it go right underneath the letter? Wouldn't that make it easier to line up?
Confuses me less. Now, if you don't have to do it that way. If you look at this first one I had over here, it's on the opposite side. The index is on the opposite side of the groove. That's a little hard for my mind to keep lined up. It's just easier to line up if you put the notch right under the letter. The user's not going to know one way or the other where it's at. You can't see it. Other questions?
You put it right, okay, so you are putting the notch right under the letter,
Yeah.
not on the opposite side.
No, it's not on the opposite side. On these, except for this first one with the columns on the outside, that has the notch on the opposite side of the letter. And I don't know why I did it that way. Maybe they had it that way in that magazine article I read. But I put it right underneath the letter. That way I don't have to worry about, well, is it straight across or not? I don't have to build a jig, build a fixture, anything like that. Make sense? Okay. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to make what's called the backbone tube. And I'm going to go ahead and change my bit right now so that it'll be a little bit easier. Now the backbone tube is going to have a hole in it for the box tube to fit in. Now, who can tell me the diameter that the backbone tube is going to be?
1 3/8.
How big a hole did I drill?
1.5
Inch and a half. Okay, so that's going to be the size of my backbone tube.
The outside diameter.
The outside diameter, yes, outside. Now the inside, I'm drilling a 1 1/8 inch hole, and that will be the size of the box tube that we make later. Okay, just grab a piece of wood and go for it, right? Oh, we got to 9 o'clock? Okay.
or take?
Give or take.
I'm assuming you're using very dry wood for all of this. Is really good.
Are you assuming using what kind of wood?
Very dry.
Well, I found out that using wet wood doesn't work very well.
No, I'm saying even slightly gray.
Yeah, if you use wet wood, which is what I did the first time I made one of these things, as it dries overnight, it doesn't work the next morning. So that is a critical point. The woods that you use need to be relatively dry so they don't move around on you. And you want something that's nice to turn, going to hold together fairly well. I like to use maple, elm, walnut. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start this one. And I won't finish it completely, this particular piece, but it'll give you an idea how to do it. Now, as before, we're going to turn a tenon on this thing. I first started out, I called these things tendons. I was informed that these are not part of the muscle, they are a tenon, not a tendon. That'll be about right. Doesn't fit, I'll go back. The other thing I do on most of this stuff, I use found wood. You know what that means?
Free.
Free, yeah. One of the things we have up at our club in Fort Collins, Loveland, we have a thing called a wood bank that we use. And it so happens the wood bank's in my backyard. So there's plenty of wood available. We don't get much walnut, but I had a student bring me some walnuts, so I've been using that. It's about gone. I'm going to have to find me another student that knows where a walnut tree is. I like to bring my tailstock up and apply a little bit of pressure on my chuck before I set it. That way I know that that thing is seated good. Nothing much more frustrating than having it come off or wobble. Okay. Okay, inch and an eighth. Now, when you're using your forestner bits, it's usually a good idea to keep it clean. And also, if you watch them, when they're cutting, you want both of those cutting edges working. You don't want one of them to be lazy. If both edges aren't cutting, everybody wait. If both of them aren't cutting, then you need to sharpen the high side. And I think that on this one, I normally go about 2 3/4, 3 inches deep. And to do that, I have to put the extension bit on, and you guys would go to sleep while I'm doing that. So I'll just tell you that hole is 3 inches deep. Okay? Everybody agree it's 3 inches deep?
More or less.
More or less?
More or less than more.
Okay, and go ahead and change this bit while I got the thing mounted up there. Thing's hot.
Tends to.
Now this is a 7/8 bit, which will be used to bore out the box tube. And depending upon our time, I may not do that, especially if you're going to sleep. Okay. Okay, bring my tailstock up and support it again. These large cone centers are handy. How many of you have a large cone center? Good. You have no excuse, right? Okay, on this backbone tube, wherever I left my notes, I think that has to be about 2 3/4, 3 inches somewhere along in there. It's in the documentation. May have that shorter. Tool rest. Thank you. Okay. It did hit. Okay, now I'm going to rough this down. But I'm not going to do the whole thing. This end down here must remain square. Don't do anything with it. It's going to be scrap, but we're going to utilize that when we start drilling holes on the drill press. Okay. Okay, you said we need 1.5 inches, right? So let's get our calipers out here. And we'll set it 1.5 inches. I made the hole, it ought to be the right size for the outside of this thing. Okay. This looks a lot like what we did before, doesn't it? Okay, I got my depth back. And again, I will mark them so I know not to go too far. This one's a little bit more critical than the outside. The diameter of this backbone tube will make a lot of difference in how smooth your rings are. So I'll taste it good. Now here's where you have to start exercising your little bit of skill. Because you want this to be a nice cylinder. Because the smoothness of this thing makes a difference how your system works. Close. You guys never have that trouble. You don't have any catches, do you? When do you usually have a catch? I didn't hear that. Yeah, during the demo. The other time is, usually I have my catches not when I'm actually trying to make the cut. It's between times when my concentration lasts a little bit. Okay, now, here's my gauge. We cut these rings, it's got to fit over there. And it tells me where my high spots are at. Tells me I got a high spot right in there. These things work much better when you're not doing a demo. Okay, so the key here is you're using one of your rings as a gauge. And at this point, I have been known to bring out a block of sandpaper, block of wood and sandpaper on it.
40 grand? 20 grand.
I usually start at about 80 and work down. This is smooth enough with a skew that actually I started about 220, 180 or 220. Okay. So you turn that down, and you get it so that it fits. Now, a very important thing before you take that off the lathe, you want to identify a place, pick out one of your flat sides, make sure the opposite side is good. Pick out a flat side and put a mark right in the middle. And then go down here. I'm gonna bring my tool rest up. I'm gonna make a mark right down that line. What's that mark for? Say again?
Pins.
It's going, that's going to tell me where the pins go, and it's also going to be removed later when I cut a slot in. Okay. Okay. I'm going to work real fast here. Oh. You see that? I drilled a hole. Drilled a hole, 3/8 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, and I turned it down. And when I'm doing that, I grab my backbone tube and make sure that it's going to fit. Didn't drill deep enough, did I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
How about this one?
Perfect. Look at that, like a glove.
Amazing.
Good fit. Hear that?
Bowling ball.
Yeah. Okay. So now I've got my backbone tube with a square head on it. I've got my line drawn down there, and I've got my box tube down here. This is going to be my base. Now the important thing I've done here is I left these 2-inch square. How many of you like to drill holes in a straight line in a round object? It's a pain, isn't it? So usually what we wind up doing is doing a lot of fixturing and jigs and so forth to do that with. Oh, I do too. There's my fixture, right there, the square ends. So, the next thing I do is let me go over here to the table. What do I do with my rings? There they are. Now I've got my 6 rings and they're labeled. Oh, there's number 1. That didn't fit. Okay, so I got my 6 rings, they're in the right order, numerical order. Now you'll notice that I'm putting the flat side up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6. A little long, that's all right. Now I put my box tube in here. Now this backbone tube is going to be glued, cut off and glued into the top piece. But right now I want to know where I'm going to drill my holes. Now remember that line? See that red line down there? It's a line we drew over there. Now the pin is going to go in that notch right in there. So I take my pencil and I draw a line across the that line there. Bring this one up, draw another line, bring that up, draw another line. So now I've got a bunch of lines on there. Then I take a center punch and put a hole just to the right of those lines, towards the bottom. I take it to the drill press, and at the drill press I clamp a straight board across the table, clamp it down there, shove this up against it, adjust it such that my bit lines up with that line. Now I use 4-penny finish nails to put these in with, for my pins. And I've had fairly good success with 1/16 inch drill bit for those 4-penny finish nails. So drill all the holes in there. How about that? All the holes are in there. Okay? That's fast, right? Okay, got those on there. Now, I need a slot in here. That square piece is handy. That holds it in place. I have one of these little Japanese pull saws that cuts on the pull stroke. I just go in there and cut that out. You got a line of holes there telling you where to cut. So I cut those in there. And I make sure it's nice and straight. This wood is thin enough that an X-Acto knife does a real good job of widening out the hole, widening out the slot, and trimming it up a little bit straighter. Okay, so now we have the backbone tube. It's got a slot in it and everything. We put our rings back on there. Okay, in usage, they're going to be all the way against that end, right? They're going to be up against this guy. So, run them all the way down to the end. Go up about 1/4 of an inch and put a line on there. Then go back over to your lathe, mount the thing up, and you, we have a backbone tube. Now, I'll warn you about this. There's something magic about cutting that slot in there. Whenever you cut that slot in there, the thing shrinks. Now, the first time I did it, I cut the slot all the way through the end. And that caused problems. So I leave that little bit on the end so that I can fit it into the top now. But this will shrink down a little bit. And I'll show you how to take care of that in a minute. Okay, we put our top on there, we drill a hole, counterbore it, and make it fit, just like a box. Okay, so we got that thing fit in there. How am I going to turn that top? I want to shape that. How am I going to do it? Anybody got any ideas? Well, it just so happens that I've got a 25 millimeter set of jaws. They fit perfectly in this thing, in expanding mode. So I put my 25 millimeter jaws on there. I put that on there in an expanding mode. I've got it held in place. I go ahead and shape it. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, the next step.
And that's the top you're shaping, right?
Yeah, that's the top. That corresponds to where they're at, the top pieces of those things. Okay, now, I need to put my pins in there. And putting those pins in there, we need to be careful.
John?
Yeah.
Pull your mic down about 1.5 inches and it won't make so much noise. There,
How's that?
that's
That
much
better? Okay, got our pins in there. I gotta put our pins in there. They're 4-penny nails. And I have a pair of dikes. I cut them all square. Now, the question is, how am I going to drive those pins in there so that they don't go too deep? I want to drive them in there, and I'm going to set them with CA glue. But I don't want them too deep. I don't want them tearing up my gift certificate inside. Anybody got any ideas?
Put a piece of pipe, metal pipe in there.
It's your Forstner bit back there.
Forstner bit. Forstner bit's the right size to fit in there. So I slide it all the way in. Fits kind of tight, but Anyway, to slide it all the way down to the end. Actually, this has got 6 holes in it. We only need to put 5 pins in. So I slide down to here. That 6th ring, if you remember, is stationary, doesn't rotate. So I slide this all the way down to the hole down here, and it's underneath that. Now I can take, put a little bit of support underneath this with something. And I can drive that pin in. And then I set it with CA glue. Make sure it's straight. When you put these pins in, make sure those soldiers are standing at attention in a straight line. If they wobble, you're going to have to go back to your backbone tube and widen out the slot. Okay, here's one that's got a slot in it. It's a little bit narrow, but it's got a slot in it. Take that pin, and I take a pair of pliers and hold between the pin and the box tube. Because when I cut that thing off, I don't want the shock of that cutting to loosen up my glue. Cut that pin down. Then I slide this over to make sure it's going to clear. Okay? They're all the same size roughly, so make sure it's going to clear. And if you need to shorten it some more, a Dremel tool with a stone on it works real nice. Make sense? Okay, you do that with all of the pins. Then you go back to the lathe and
John?
yes.
Now, do you put your backbone on there before you check the height?
It's easier if you do. You understand what he's saying? You put the backbone pin on there. That helps hold your ring in the right place. Hadn't thought about that. I always do it anyway. But that helps you judge the size. And actually, when I get ready to cut it, I put the backbone tube on there and the pin sticking up, and I run the ring down there, and that gives me a visual guide as to how long to cut it. Then I cut it and bring my notch around and slid it over there and adjust it with a stone on a Dremel tool as necessary till it fits. Then I go to the next pin, repeat it, next pin, next pin. So I got all 5 pins. Then go back over here and mount this thing up, bring your tailstock up and support it, and turn your base. Now, it's rather important that you don't tighten that tailstock in there too tight, because it is a wedge. You'll wind up using some CA glue to repair the split if you tighten it up too much. Questions so far? Where's one of those Cryptex that's floating around? Somebody can pass one of them back up here. I don't care which one.
How did you locate the pinholes on the inner working?
Okay. This was inside the box tube when I drilled the holes.
So you went all the way?
I went all the way
Okay.
through.
All right, that's what I thought, I just didn't.
Good point, good point. I have both of them in there. I drill all the way through into the center.
Okay.
That way I got
When
the
they
holes.
line up.
Yeah, I got the holes in the box tube and I got the holes
Okay.
in here. And what I wind up doing is I cut those holes out by cutting that slot in there.
Got it.
Everybody got that? And you have that box tube in there when you're drilling those holes. Okay.
And your spacing was, what are you?
The spacing, I determined empirically. Like that word, empirically? That's an engineer for you. When I had these rings on here, remember I put all these rings on here and then ran them down and put the lines across there. That way, if the rings have different sizes, variations in width, no, you can't do that. Nobody's going to do that in here. But If you made a mistake and they aren't exactly the same width, then that would compensate for it. You just want to make sure that that hole is down below that mark so that your pin will be inside the hole, inside that ring. So that when you turn it, it'll fit in there. Let me open this one up just a little bit. Let's see, yeah, okay. Gotta look and see which one I got. No, Apple's on the one that looks like a bishop. Well,
Finite number of possibilities.
there's a large number of possibilities, but I'll tell you what the password is now. You can forget it before your meeting when you sell this. You're going to sell this when? Auction it when? Christmas?
Christmas.
Okay.
Write it down and put it inside.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but I did write it down. It's on the bottom. If you look at it, it says Front Range Wood Turners, Denver, Colorado. First letter of each word is the code. So, what we've got is we got all of our pins in there. We've turned this, and we have the top turned. We have our backbone tube. It's like so. Now, this is shaped, right? This is shaped. Now I'm going to put everything together. So you take all of your rings and you put them on there in order with the appropriate sequence, like so. And you got all 6 rings on there. You bring up your tube and you line everything up, make sure it works. And if it doesn't work, you adjust. The adjustments that you can make, since it isn't glued together, if necessary, you can go in and widen some of the pins in here, or widen the notch for the pins inside the ring. You may need to widen your slot a little bit. You get everything so that it will fit and it will work. It's called dry fitting. Okay, everybody heard that term before? Everything works. Then you want to. What I like to do at this point is I'll put a little bit of wax on this ring in here. A little bit of wax on it, but don't get it down here where you're going to glue it. You put it down here where you're going to glue it, it's a little hard to do. Okay, get everything set up, test it, put all my rings on there, and lo and behold, there's a gap there. It's the thing, like I told you before, it shrinks. So now it's going to be hard to get a good glue joint. Any ideas? Wedge, yeah. Get you a piece of scrap wood and cut a wedge that you can run in there. You put the glue on the inside of your last ring, and you put it on, and you take your wedge, you shove it in there, and it expands it out, you let it dry. Now, the reason I say I want to put it on this ring is that if it moves when I'm putting it together, the glue is going to go outside. If I put it on the box, on the backbone tube itself, when I put it together, it'd just be my luck to go in and glue the other rings together. I don't want to do that. So at that point, you've got something that looks like this and this, and you go ahead and put it back together and make sure that it fits. You have a little bit of adjustment capability now, but it's limited. It's limited to shaving off a little bit of the pins one way or another, or if you're real careful, you might have to bend them sideways. But you really want these pins lined up in a straight line. If they're not in a straight line, it makes fitting this thing together difficult. Don't ask me how I know that, okay? That's why I came up with this idea of leaving the scrap on here, leaving it square, lining it up on a board on your drill press, so you keep those lines and those things in a straight line. That way your holes are all going to be in the same axis. And if you drill it by hand, you can do it, but it's difficult. If you drill it by hand, you're going to have them wobbling back and forth.
Now, you may have explained, but how do you determine your length of your backbone too, so you use the right spacing?
Okay, what I did, at this point right here, I've got the holes drilled, and everything's fit together. I've got my slot cut in there. Say again?
Keep going.
I got the slot cut in there. I haven't cut this off yet. I put my 6 rings on there. And, oh, there's one that's lettered. Got a notch cut in, okay. Put my 6 rings on there. 5, 6. That's too long, isn't it? Put my backbone tube on there. Shove it down like that. I go up 1/4 of an inch beyond this this last ring. Go up 1/4 of an inch.
How did you know how deep to drill that center out when you hadn't made the lowest,
Which center are you talking about? When I drilled this, I designed it ahead of time. I knew what the dimensions are going to be close. And if I drill too far, no big deal. Drill it into the waist. As long as I drill at least, there's 6 rings here, 1/2 inch apiece. That'd be 3 inches, or 3/8 of an inch apiece. A little bit under 3 inches, and a little bit longer than that. And I think it's 2 3/4 is what I've figured out that it would be.
okay, so you don't want it to go all the way through though,
The hole?
yeah,
It doesn't need to go all the way through here, but
No.
it goes all the way through the box tube.
it does.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, I
And
thought
then
you
cut it
didn't
to
want it to.
size.
Say again?
Then you cut it to size,
I cut it to size.
whatever that size is.
I
didn't think it would.
I leave it about 1/4 of an inch long. And guess how deep the recess is going to be?
About 1/4 inch.
About 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, cause you gotta have room for your rings to turn.
Put that thing on there. When you put your rings on, there's another place where you can have a little bit of flexibility on how you do things. I keep coming up with that guy, he's a little bit too little. Oh, they're over there. Okay. Okay, put the rings on. And you notice with this one, it's a little bit long. It doesn't bother me. Because what's important is that when this thing finally goes together, this surface here has to jam up against that last ring. So if this is a little bit long, after I glue it, I can trim it off. They're usually not that too much long though.
If you wanted all the rings that are lettered to turn,
No,
could you not put the last unlettered ring on there as a retainer?
well, if you go back to this one has 5 rings in the middle and 1 on each end. And it has index marks on the end. So when you put that 6th ring on there, you have a choice. That 6th ring, it's going to be stationary. It can have an index mark on it with no letters. Or you can be devious and you can put letters on it and make the guy guess which letter is going to be the index. Okay? Now there's another way to be devious. Nobody in here would do that, I'm sure. But
Make it so it doesn't fit at all.
here's one that's got a notch in it. That's for for your pin to go through. If you've got somebody that tries to finesse this thing and feel where those notches are at and line them up, put a couple extra notches in it. Don't blow this up. I didn't say that, did I? Now, the width of this notch, I'll repeat this again, the width of this notch is very sensitive to how easy it is to open your box. Some of these guys are easier to open than others. And the reason for that is the width of that notch. The other thing that will make it difficult is if these pins aren't lined up straight. Now, the other thing I do, when so I started to show you a while ago, I put these on here.
So go back to your notch, but the point there was make the notch a little bit bigger and it'll be easier to open?
Yeah, make the notch a little bit bigger, it's easier to open. Okay, when I put this last piece on here, when I first started making these things, I slipped me a piece of paper in here to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. Now, the one that looks like a rook, it's got the white top, if you have a chance to look at it again, when you're trying to open that thing, you'll find that the rings move around a lot. They don't stay stuck. They're real free moving. It makes it hard to open, hard to keep in line. So what I do now, like on this one, when I put this thing together, I put a little bit of gentle pressure on it when I put that wedge in. So there is a little bit of friction between the rings. It makes it feel better and makes it less likely to get offline. The other thing you may or may not have noticed, but when I work these things, I grab hold of it with one hand, on the hand that's on the end with the fixed ring. And I start from the fixed ring and work across, and each ring I grab hold of it and hold it in place, so that when I'm turning the next ring, it doesn't turn the other rings. Makes it a little easier to line them up. More questions?
John,
Yes.
now that you're at this stage in building these, how long would it take you start to finish to build one?
Him or you?
Depends upon how many eruptions I get.
None.
This one, with no interruptions, I think I could do it in an 8-hour day. If I'm really cooking, I'd probably do it in about 6 hours. Now, when I did that sphere, it took me several false starts to figure out how to do the mechanics of holding the thing together while I turn it. And after 2 or 3 prototypes that didn't work, I finally got it. It took me a total of 3 days to figure that out. Those are 12-hour days.
John, how do you finish the bottom?
Okay, the way I finish 90% of the stuff I make, I use Minwax tongue oil finish.
Well, no, turning the bottom.
Turning to the bottom. I have it on the lathe, and I just take a parting tool and go down, and I stop before I go all the way through. And I take a saw and cut it and trim it and sand it. If I turn all the way down, invariably it breaks off, and I got this hole in the bottom of my piece. So I stop ahead of time.
And you're using your truck to expand in there and hold that?
On this one, I'm turning this piece here, so I've got the tenon on the end. So I only got the tenon. I make this shape, and I just part it off when I get ready, get through. Now on the other one, on the top, on that one, I've got this recess, so there I'm using an expanding chuck, and I have full access to the whole thing to turn it.
But you can't turn that other one around.
I probably could. I could,
put it.
Theoretically, I could make a jam chuck with a hole on it, do like that. Perfectly acceptable to do. If you do that, you might want to do it before you put the nails in. A lot of these things, the sequence in which you do them doesn't make a whole lot of difference, as long as you get certain critical things done before you go on to the next one. Like the lettering and the notching of the rings, that could be postponed until you got everything turned, and that's the last thing you do. Now, as far as finish on this, I usually put 2 to 3 coats of tung oil on it, letting it dry between time. And then I buff it with the Beal buffing system. Everybody familiar with that? Okay. That's the way this one was finished. That's got 3 coats of tung oil and then buffed.
And it's done before assembly or after?
After. I don't want any tung oil or other finish interfering with my glue joints. And what I have found is by using tung oil, after I get through coating it and wiping it off and everything, I just turn the rings a little bit, spread it out. It works all right. I've never had them stick out. If I use polyurethane or something like that, I'm afraid that it glue it together. I've never tried it. Somebody might be able to be careful and get a better finish on it. Now, as far as putting the letters on there, that's up to your ingenuity. I showed you how to make the division marks, and you could use steel stamps and heat them up and brand them in there. You could do them with a Sharpie. I did it with a marking, with a pyrography pen. Use your ingenuity. I just happen to like them to look like this. And if you'll notice from that to wherever it went, that castle, and this one, the quality of the markings got a little bit better. Maybe not perfect, but I think they're a little bit better. Those of you who have the American Woodturner, if you look in the front, Betty Scarpino has a editor's column in there, and she requests people to send in photos of the cryptics they make. So there's one challenge for you, send in photos to Betty. The other one is I'd like to see somebody try that sphere, see if they can come up with a better way of making it than I did.
Open it up. Let us see.
It's been opened 2 or 3 times tonight. If you want to open it up, the password is George, George. Now that one is an example of the not having enough tolerance in there, so that one turns a little bit hard. But once I got it together, I couldn't take it apart to adjust it very well. That was put completely together before I turned it. Then I had to go back and figure out how to mark it. Other questions, comments?
If any of you ordered the